We'll now move in. So as I mentioned, we're going to go position by position. We'll start with the QB. So for each position, we'll go, in that 100 to 150 range. So everybody's going to be on average going after pick 100. And then we'll go into the weeds and go real deep after 150, who are some guys that might not even be getting drafted that could come into some real fantasy value here. We'll start at quarterback. Who's your favorite in that 100 to 150 range, Pat?
So the single favorite is probably Derek Carr. He doesn't go too deep in that, too deep after pick 100. But if you're maybe the last guy to get a quarterback in your 12-team league and he's still sitting there, I like him a lot. I mean, it seems like it's just such a good situation for him this year. And he's never really had a problem putting up yardage. It's the touchdown totals that have been kind of lagging behind, consistently under 30. I think he has a good chance to eclipse that this year. Reunited with Davante Adams, who, if you haven't seen the stat page for Davante Adams in college at Fresno State and what he did with Carr there, check that out because your eyes will bug out of your head when you see that. So they've got some, they're going to have some chemistry together. Plus, Darren Waller hopefully can stay healthy this year, and Hunter Renfrow really proved himself to be a, pretty good secondary third option last year. When he was kind of forced into a bigger role. So a lot of weapons for him. I almost kind of like that the Raiders offensive line stinks because, I don't know how effectively they're going to be able to run the ball. I think they're going to have to kind of pass their way down the field. And, man, they're just in this division where it seems like every game is going to be a shootout with Denver and the Chargers and the Chiefs. Game script is, okay corral pretty much anytime there's an AFC West divisional showdown. So a lot to like here. I think, Carr has sort of established this steady baseline, but I think he can sort of bump up the baseline this year.
I love that call. And to speak of those shootouts of that division, they probably have the worst defense too. So, they're going to always be chasing the points. I love it. I just looked up the stats because I knew they were gaudy, but I didn't realize it was 1,719 yards and 24 touchdowns on 131 catches. We know that's not going to happen at the professional level, but man, he could still put up some damn good numbers. I knew it was good. That is breathtaking stats right there. In that 100 to 150 range, right around where Carr's going, I actually kind of view it as Carr's one of the last QB1s I'll accept. I love him as that later round guy that at the top 12 typically go around 8 or 9, and then he'll fall to round 10 off. And there's one other guy going in that range that I really love that I have a tough time deciding if I have to between the two, and that's Kirk Cousins, who has a pretty similar script to what you're saying in terms of great weaponry, a new scheme coming in that we know is going to be a bit pass happier. Everybody there is raving about it, especially Justin Jefferson, how much he's moving around, the layup targets, all that good stuff, and a bad defense that's going to probably be chasing a lot of points throughout games. We've seen Cousins put up nearly 5K yards with far less weaponry over with Washington. I think he could go completely nuts as well. So I have a tough time choosing between the two. In fact, if I haven't gotten a quarterback yet and both those guys are there and I'm at the turn, I like taking them both because I really think they're both going to have some very solid numbers this year. And that's kind of the cutoff for me too. Carr, Cousins, you can lump Rodgers in that tier too. And then it gets a little dicey. I don't really want a QB1 after that, even though we have a couple more guys we'll discuss here. Do you like Cousins at all, though?
I kind of do. I mean, the eye test, to me, Carr is the much better quarterback. I've just seen Cousins come up short in big games too many times. I know that doesn't really matter to fantasy players that much. Throwing short of the sticks on 3rd and 10. So I think Cousins is a better fantasy quarterback than real life. You can't really argue with the fantasy numbers he's put up. But one thing, another thing that kind of sways me against Cousins a little bit, real tough matchup out of the chute with the Packers at home. I know, the Packers defense hasn't been thought of as a juggernaut in recent years, but man, it's really good this year. That secondary they have with, Jair Alexander and Rasul Douglas, two of the best safeties in the league, Eric Stokes and Rashawn Gary. Spearheading what's looking like a pretty good pass rush now. That defense, I think, is going to be one of the top 5 defenses in the league. Not just my Green Bay Packer bias talking, but I do think it's a tough matchup for Cousins right out of the gate. So yeah, I mean, I'm okay with Cousins in a deeper league as my a 14 or 16 teamer. I'd take him as my starter, but I just don't like him quite as much as Carr.
Yeah, I get that too, and you get the shootout starting with Carr with the Chiefs, I believe, in Week 1, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
yes.
So some fireworks right out the gate there. I love it. Well, after those guys are gone, whichever one you go with, I do think the Carr is definitely the safer, and certainly if those touchdowns come in, man, the ceiling could be crazy. But after those guys are gone, whether you're looking for a QB2 or maybe you punted the position and now you're scrambling for your number one guy, do you have somebody else in that range that you kind of like?
Yeah, so kind of like that's a good disclaimer. Like I'm not all in on this guy, but Daniel Jones, just because I'm intrigued by we know what a cheat code running quarterbacks can be, and Jones is one of those few guys routinely going after the top 20 quarterbacks who can really run around a lot. I think his job is pretty secure right now. We'll see, like if he turns into a turnover machine again, which he's kind of been throughout his career. Maybe they think about putting Tyrod Taylor in there, but I'm holding out hope that Brian Dable can sort of unlock Daniel Jones. Like as soon as Dable came in, right away he was asking Jones what sort of plays he was comfortable running. Like think back to your high school days, your college days. What did you feel most confident with coming out of the huddle when you were running this or that? And like they've improved their offensive line a little bit. I wouldn't say their receiver core is great, but they've got some intriguing weapons with Kadarius Toney and Kenny Galladay and Wan'Dale Robinson. So I'm just like kind of banking on the rushing providing sort of a baseline for Jones, and maybe he can kind of finally figure it out with probably the best play caller he's had since coming into the NFL.
Yeah, it's a really intriguing case. And in fact, I don't like Daniel Jones at all as a player, but when I did my projections, just because of the rushing upside, like I finished him up. And that's why I love doing projections, because it kind of forces your biases out and you just have to look at it. He still came out like right at my top 20 QBs because of the rushing. I asked, what is this? I would never have thought Daniel Jones would have been in there. So I think I had him at like 27 in my rankings. I had to bump him up when looking at the stats. And just in general, there's a great podcast JJ Zachariason does. Everybody listening to this probably already has heard of the Late Round podcast, but he has a great episode he does every year on team level regression. And he talked about how the Giants, like even just by history, no improvements needed. They should average near 14 more touchdowns this year because of what history has suggested as in terms of positive regression for the worst scoring teams. And now you mix in one of the better play callers. He seems like an offensive genius based on what he did in Buffalo. If there's any hope for Daniel Jones, and maybe he is just garbage and he gets benched and you cut him, that's the whatever, you get rid of him. But if there's any hope, it is Brian Daboll. I think he is a great play caller, regression on his side, two of the better tackle duos at this point since they've invested in the position back-to-back years. I see it, in terms of just a dart throw, late round guy. I like him better in seasonal than best ball because I am a little worried he could get benched. So then you just have that like hole on your roster, but taking him in seasonal, seeing how he does and cutting him if he sucks. Like I think that's a great plan. I really do think in terms of safety, like Matt Ryan, he's going to start all year. They're going to be pushing the pace for the Colts there with Reich there. They've been a little bit slower these last few years, but can you really blame them when the game would have been on the line with Wentz didn't come through? The corpse of Phillip Rivers and then Jacoby Brissett. The last time they had a quarterback, and Reich himself is kind of referenced, Andrew Luck, it feels like we have a guy like that finally for the first time. They were first in pace. They were just bombing the league. And yeah, of course you have Taylor. You're going to center your offense around that. But I think that we see a bit more balance here. He's got fine weapons if this Alec Pierce kid develops like I think he could. So I really like him as just like, it's not sexy. It's not exciting. But if you've missed the position, I think him, and then also maybe pairing him with Davis Mills, who had 4 300-yard games and 12 starts last year on a very bad, slow-paced offense. I like Pep Hamilton. I think he's a creative mind. We've seen him produce some good quarterback stats, and all the reviews on Mills and camp so far have been raving. I think he was the best rookie quarterback outside of Mac Jones last year. So I really don't mind him. We'll talk about Nico Collins a little bit, but he seems to be taking a step. They've rebolstered the offensive line a bit. So as a guy that goes largely undrafted, I think Davis Mills could be an intriguing late quarterback stab. Any thoughts on either of those guys or anyone else you'd want to before we move on to another position?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on Ryan. I haven't liked him much in Atlanta. There's definitely a limited ceiling with his non-mobility. But, you referenced Phillip Rivers being pretty dusty in his final year in Indianapolis, but he still finished just outside of QB1 rate. He was like a high-end QB2, just sort of, being efficient and making that offense go. And like, as with Matt Ryan, Rivers had no rushing upside whatsoever, of course. But, he did enough through the air to make it happen. And, his wide receivers that year probably weren't any better than what Ryan is going to be working with this year. So I like that a lot. And I'm kind of with you on Mills. I mean, they're going to just, why not let him go? They're going to have a decision to make next year. There's some really good QBs in the class of 2023. But why not see like exactly where you stand with Davis Mills and, what you can count on him for in the future. So I like it. And we know, he's probably going to be chasing points, trailing on the scoreboard for most of the year. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a good call because you can get him at the end of drafts. Even in deep drafts, he's going to be there late.
Right. Absolutely. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.